So glad you could make our time to join us on today's episode of Tax Matters. My name is Olumoyiwa Matuloko. How's your week been and how's business going? Today on Tax Matters, we are going on an educational voyage. Of course, you know that our forte is enlightenment and education of taxpayers. But this is with a difference. We're going to give you a voice. We're going to allow some stakeholders to speak on your behalf, hoping that they will be addressing the questions that are already nagging your minds. And of course, will provide answers from the tax authorities. You will recall that on this program, we shared with you the proceedings of a tax stakeholders event hosted by PricewaterhouseCoopers on Monday, the 23rd of November 2015, at which it presented the report on its obtained paying taxes. The theme of the event was the burden and benefits of tax compliance in Nigeria, managing the changing tax landscape and preparing for the inevitable taxing times ahead. The event was also used to present the World Bank Group and PwC Guide to Doing Business in Nigeria 2016. As part of the report on 2015, it was discovered, for example, that while the total tax rate as a percentage of commercial profits for a model company in the world was 40.8%, in Nigeria it is 33%. The average, or model company if you like, makes 25.6 tax payments per year. But in Nigeria, the average company makes 49 tax payments. On the average, a model company takes 261 hours to comply with its tax obligations, while in Nigeria, the average company takes 908 hours to comply.
We should have an objective of moving Nigeria up to top 20 countries in the world where it's easy to pay tax. We're not saying reduce the tax rate. By the way, our tax rates are competitive. But the time it takes us to comply is unbelievably high. We are the third most difficult in the world.
According to the organizers, this huge compliance burden and the changing tax landscape informed the theme of the stakeholders event.
Part of what I'll be sharing with you is the report of the paying taxes report that we did as PwC globally, jointly with the World Bank. And this covers 189 economies worldwide. So it's like the whole world covered. We're able to bring our insights. So we thought it would be a very useful exercise to bring stakeholders together. Let's talk about these issues that are extremely important to us, and in fact haven't been as important as this in any time in our history. Because now we have come to the realization that it's no longer business as usual, just waiting for money to flow in from crude oil and gas. Nobody knows, but based on analysis of experts and forecasts, nobody is expecting $100 per barrel anytime soon. So what that means is we have just now found the new oil, and it happens to be tax. So it's no longer a question of do we want to collect more taxes, we need to get more people to pay. We don't need to ask that. It's about how best do we do that so that we don't kill businesses, because if they are no longer there, they can't even pay any tax, whether it's small or big. How can we go about doing this in the most business-friendly manner, in a way that helps us to have sustainable development, create employment, help small businesses, SMEs, to thrive, to be able to come up with more transparency and accountability around revenue of government, and using those monies we collect from us to provide services to us. Starting point is to say, where are we coming from? Before our GDP was rebased in 2014, we used to have tax to GDP ratio at 12%. Some of you may have read the news and the reports provided by the Ministry of Finance at the time. which says that we're at 20% tax to GDP ratio. So I'm here to tell you that it wasn't exactly correct, because the calculation was done using all the inflows into the federation account. And we know that it is not everything that goes into the federation account that is tax. So what we did was to try and isolate tax from other revenue. When you sell your share of crude oil, it's not tax. So we looked at the information, and this was for 2013, and then overall amount for 2014. FRS in 2013 collected 4.8 trillion naira. Customs, sometimes we forget that they're a revenue agency. They collected 833.4 billion naira. All the states' internal revenue services, 36 of them, collected $649 billion. Sorry, I wish it was dollars. Naira. Local government, so this I have to confess, we could not get data for them. It was impossible to get data for them. So we estimated that they collected about 1/3 of what states collect. Whether you agree or disagree, it doesn't change the final conclusion. Okay? And then it turned out that as a nation, we collected 6.5 trillion naira. If you use the rebased GDP of about 81 trillion, then that gives you about 8% tax to GDP ratio. Obviously, this is extremely low. Given that globally, you look at an average of 25%, what we did was to isolate the GDP of the oil industry and isolate their tax payments. Then we did the tax of the oil and gas industry to their own GDP. It was 27%. We now did the tax to GDP ratio for the rest of us. Guess what it was? 4%. At 4%, we're lower than many countries that have no income taxes at all. We are lower than many countries that are fighting war as we speak. So it is inconceivable as a nation that we continue to rely on this. It is not sustainable. It's an invitation for a country to go bankrupt, and that's not our prayer for Nigeria. So we have to do something differently. So the burdens and benefits of compliance. We think that first we should start with the benefits. If we all pay our taxes, there will be reduction in the reliance on revenue from oil or commodities or whatever it is, be it even solid minerals. It will provide a sense of belonging and having a skin in the game. You feel like I'm part of government because I've paid my taxes. Leads to better governance, and this we have seen around the world in the project we do every year, that there's a high correlation between the level of tax compliance and good governance in every country that we have seen and observed. Because when people pay, they feel the pain. Because they are feeling the pain, they ask questions of government. Because they keep asking questions, government will do the right thing. It will reduce inequality when we all pay our taxes, because we can get the rich to pay more. That's the way the tax system is designed to work. And then take care of the poor people. And that can also help us to deal with insecurity, by the way. Long-term sustainable growth for the economy, provision of infrastructure and social well-being, resulting in better living standard. So it's not that Nigerians don't like to pay tax. They want to see social services, they want to see a system that works, and they want to be sure that the taxes they pay will be used for their benefit. We can also get information when we all pay our taxes to develop policies. If the tax revenue we collect from manufacturers in a particular year has gone down, it's not about let's go and do audit and beat them up so they can pay more because last year they paid so much. No, it's about asking how come the revenue has gone down. You may then realize that based on the GDP information for the last 2 quarters, the manufacturing sector has been in recession, negative growth. Of course, we expect that to play out in the taxes they pay, and somebody then comes up with a policy. How can we help? So taxation can also provide that input into how we do governance. The burden of paying taxes. And I want to tell you about the report of our survey, PwC and the World Bank. We looked at how people pay taxes around the world. And we use a model company such that the whole world is put on an equal footing. So this company is in the most populous city. We look at 3 indicators. One is the total tax rate that this company will have to pay. It's not just what they pay, it's what they pay and they bear. So for example, when I collect VAT from my customers and I remit, it's not my tax. Okay, so it's not part of my tax. But when I pay company income tax, or when I pay VAT and the input VAT cannot be recovered and I bear it, okay, so we call it taxes borne. Now we look at total tax rate. Number 2, we look at the number of tax payments this company has to make. Number of tax payments. Number 3, we look at the time it will take this company to comply with its tax obligation. So we look at those 3, and then we came up with this conclusion. Unfortunately, Nigeria is not ranking well. We cannot be at 8% ratio of tax to GDP and then have a complex system of tax compliance. And you see the number of payments, which is not surprising. By the way, this model company is not a large company, it's a medium-sized company. It makes about 59 payments. Who does that? How about we make this become 3? There are countries in the survey have only 3 taxes that they collect from their people. Look at the time. So I thought to compare it with the world. The time to comply with tax obligation worldwide, see the bar. In Africa, even Africa that is complicated by itself, ECOWAS, and here we are. So we need to bring this down by whatever means we can. So how do we address the challenges? We think that we should focus on simplicity, certainty, and clarity. It should be easy to get information from just the website of the tax authority. Low cost of taxpayers for taxpayers to comply. We shouldn't make tax compliance itself costing us, and this includes everything, including post-filing requirement, like dealing with tax audit, processing tax clearance certificates, tax litigation. It's normal to go to court in any tax system, but that shouldn't be a project for 10 years. And the money you are paying to lawyers and accountants is even more than the tax bill. That's not how to develop the tax system. Then fairness is important. All citizens are treated equally, which means those who do not pay are punished.
After Mr. Oyedele's presentation, a robust question and answer session ensued.
My question is simple. Really, what are the initiatives that both at the federal level and at the state level that is going to be done in dealing with the issue of bribery and corruption?
Or for our vendors that we have withheld taxes, we are unable to pay if we don't have the TIN number. What are you considering in order to collect those taxes without TIN numbers? We want to pay. We don't want it sitting on our books, but the banks are refusing to collect unless we have TIN numbers.
As a conglomerate, we have operation in several states in Nigeria. So we've had a situation where payee of a staff based in one state was mistakenly paid to another state. I mean, knowing the way that the Inland Revenue Service works in Nigeria, now it will take probably about 2-3 years before they will come back to us asking us, you've not paid our tax. So I don't know, is there anything we can do, I mean, for us to just make appropriate adjustment for things like this, to take from the wrong state to now pass on to the correct state?
It would be nice to find out what is being done in terms of bringing in, let's say, key players in the SME space. What do I mean by that? Nigeria is reputed to have, let's say, about almost 14 million micro SMEs, employing an average of 3 Nigerians. That gives you a substantial number. So I don't know the number. I haven't shared the data between states and FAS. I don't know the number of Nigerians that are paying tax now. But it would be nice for us to know how many Nigerians effectively are we planning to bring into the tax bracket.
What's the expectation from FRS in driving the national tax policy? Is it a dead project, or we should have some expectation in terms of direction in the new administration?
If you import a petroleum, because I think I'm talking from experience, so I want to get some clarification. When you talk about withholding tax, we know value-added tax is a consumption tax. And on value-added tax, you know it is fees, either on service or good. But on withholding tax, we have contract, we have some other things. This one is 5%, this one is 10%. So a lot of people, there is a misconception on which category has to be placed under contract or under service. That people will now start looking on where to pay it, and tax authority come and they start giving some definition based on the vacuum in the process.
Mine is both a question and a contribution, but I'll start with the contribution. The person who asked about SMEs, I just want to say that aside from going ahead to tax SMEs directly, I feel that the government can view SMEs as a way of also, if you're a business, you would want to focus on areas that will increase your profits. And since we know that there are a lot of SMEs in Nigeria, I just want to suggest that we should have a way of integrating them. That means bringing them in, saying that we're going to help you manage your record system, your record keeping, and then in return, we would know at what point you're making enough profit for us to tax. And then secondly, I also want to suggest that there are a lot of e-commerce activities going on nowadays, and so the government should also look into that, maybe partnering with InterSwitch or those who are directly connected to collecting these revenues from them on VAT. So you could get your VAT from that. And I also wanted to ask on input VAT for services. I tried, I know it's there for goods and all of that, but for services, if I'm a legal practitioner, what input VAT am I entitled to? If I take a client to a restaurant or something and I pay VAT on that, am I allowed to deduct it? And then finally, for filing returns, this goes to LIRS. Filing returns, there's a penalty if you don't file by the 31st of January, I think. And I'm wondering, I've already paid this tax. Why should I be penalized for not filing at that time? I'm not saying there shouldn't be a penalty, but I think it's too high. If I filed, you should have the records, and you should be able to get those records.
I have an advice for you, sirs. If we use electronic payments, if we encourage electronic payment on just about everything that we purchase, I believe that compliance, especially on the indirect one, though everything I pay with my tax abroad, through my card, I get the information back. I'm sure that would also improve on collection.
It's a new dawn in Nigeria, and the mantra is change. The wind of change is blowing all over Nigeria and beckons to you. One sure way to respond is to perform your civic duty, pay your tax. With taxes, government generates revenue to fulfill its electoral promises, ensure regular power supply, provide good security, standard education, medical care, true total change. Individuals and corporations enjoy specific benefits, rights and privileges for paying taxes and avoid the consequences and penalties of not paying. Oil revenue is no longer sufficient to bring desired change, but your tax can. It pays to pay your tax. A message from the Federal Inland Revenue Service.
Welcome back. We do hope that these contributors have spoken your minds. They have brought out some of the questions that are tugging at your hearts. Now to the answers, the responses from the tax administrators, hoping that they will address some of your concerns.
I like the comment on the SME that was made by Demola. So one is about how do we tax them, and then the lady said, well, it's not just about taxing them. We need to say, how can we help them? You need to help them first before you tax them. And there are lots of initiatives that we can also look at in Nigeria. Then there was a question on withholding tax as to when do you know it's 5 as contracts, when is there another one? Withholding tax is one of the most complex areas of tax we have to deal with in Nigeria, unfortunately, and it's to do with the drafting of the law. So as it is now, the way I advise people is the law says what rate you should pay on specific items. So management, consultancy, commission, those rates are specific. The confusion always comes from ordinary cost of business and any other contract. So what I always say is find out if your activity falls under any of the specific category. If it does, apply the rate. If it doesn't, then apply 5%. If you're entirely convinced that it's ordinary cost of business, then don't apply anything. But be aware you are taking a risk.
We want to lead by example, and we will have run a transparent administration, and we'll have zero tolerance for corruption. This also has to do with the way with our work processes that we are reviewing, and then we are also trying to block loopholes and leakages. And then about the issue of payments wrongly made to separate states. The provision is there to refund tax that is not properly made. FIRS has laid that example. They've been doing it over the years. And even we as the state, in fact, when we defended our budget just about a week ago, we made case that there should be provision for tax refund. If we are quick to take revenue from people and if we even penalize them for not paying as and when due, there should also be a machinery, be as a government that wants to be transparent and we want to show empathy and be sure that we do things the right way, that there must also be provision for tax refund. And then, even if it has to do with states, that's why we have the Joint Tax Board. It's the clearinghouse for such issues. So anyone that is wants to ventilate can escalate it to the Joint Tax Board, where the clearinghouse will be there. I think there's a department in charge of that that will ensure that what is wrongly made, there is a reconciliation that can be carried out, and then what is due to each state will eventually get to them. And then our sister mentioned about the issue of penalty on late filing, and that while having paid your tax, why should you have to be fined again on tax that you owe? It tells that the laws were not made by the Lagos State government. It is a federal law. And the relevant section, I think, is section 81, subsection 2 and 3, that if you fail to file your returns of the income of your employees within the preceding year, then on conviction, if it's a company, then you'll be fined 500,000 naira, and if it's an individual, it will be 50,000 naira. So, I mean, since we didn't make the law, it's a federal law. If you feel that aggrieved about that provision, I think the best thing for you is to go back to the federal government that makes laws of the Personal Income Tax Act to amend it, that you are offended by that provision.
The Executive Chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service also provided answers and clarifications on some issues.
In terms of bribery and corruption at the state and federal level, just like the Chairman Elias did say, there's zero tolerance for corruption. FIS does have, we do have some agencies attached to us within our office, and they also do investigate such things even without the knowledge of our staff. And if anyone is asking or requesting that you make any payments or any gratification, kindly let us know undercover, and we'll certainly deal with it. The issue of the payment without TIN, in my presentation I said we have opened the window whereby if you don't have a tax ID, you can still make any payment, and it will be followed up by us. If any bank refuses to take that payment, just let us know. I can assure you that we'll handle the situation. Because I do know a number of banks will receive payments without TIN, and we have told all banks through formal letters that they should receive all payments. The issue of how many Nigerians are paying taxes and how many do we plan on bringing in, I'll just talk about this with the Joint Tax Board in discussing with the various states chairmen who basically have the responsibility for PIT. We expect within the first quarter of next year to add at least 5 million individuals into TaxNet, and in terms of corporate organizations, 500,000. In terms of national tax policy, basically the Constitution does say that every individual who earns an income should pay tax, and of course all corporate bodies who make profit have to pay tax, and there are various other taxes, VAT, withholding tax as required. Basically, we intend to ensure that that is carried out, and that is without prejudice to the autonomy and independence of the states and the local governments. In terms of the partnering with InterSwitch and all that to help direct collection of VAT and all that, It is presently in process and will be informing you hopefully in the first quarter of 2016.
And from the Coordinating Director, Domestic Tax Group at the Federal Inland Revenue Service.
The issue of input VAT for service. The law is, for VAT, the law is clear about that for VAT, service does not qualify for input VAT.
Do you provide goods and services? Then you must answer these important questions. Are you registered for VAT? Do you charge VAT on the goods and services you provide? Do you keep records of all your transactions? Do you file VAT returns? Do you remit VAT collected to government coffers? If your answer to any of these questions is no, then you are breaking the law. The law demands total compliance. Therefore, you must register for VAT. You must charge VAT on goods and services. You must file VAT returns. And you must remit all VAT collected on behalf of government within 21 days to the bank nearest to you. To do otherwise is a crime punishable everywhere in the world. VAT is prescribed by the law. Do the right thing. Collect and pay VAT. This message is from the FIRS. It pays to pay your tax.
We thank you most sincerely for watching. We do hope that in our only two ways, we have been able to enlarge your coast, to broaden your knowledge. Let's do this again next week. Same station, same day of the week, same time of the day. Have a blessed week ahead.